Gray birds, nodding along the sidewalk, on the subway grate, on the plaza ledge, investigating whatever fell out of someone's lunch. You have walked past them 10,000 times without a second thought. But here's what you were actually walking past. A domesticated animal, bred by humans, carried across an ocean, adapted over millennia to live exactly where you found it, because we designed it for exactly this kind of life.
Every feral pigeon in every city in the world came from birds humans bred, kept, used, and then stopped wanting. They didn't go anywhere because they couldn't.
And what we built them into, across 10,000 years of directed evolution, the fearlessness, the fertility, the extraordinary range of forms a single species can take, is one of the stranger stories in the history of our relationship with animals.
Because the bird I'm about to show you and the pigeon on your sidewalk are the same animal, the same species, one origin.
Watch this bird. It wants to fly. You can see it in the way its wings twitch, the way it tenses up on the ground. And then it tries, and instead of lifting off, it somersaults backward across the concrete. Again and again, it cannot stop, and it will never fly. We bred it that way, deliberately over hundreds of generations, selecting and refining a neurological disorder, a brain condition that alters the activity of nearly 2,000 genes until the tumbling became reliable, consistent, and spectacular enough to win competitions. The bird is called a Parlor Roller. It is one of 800 breeds and varieties humans have carved out of a single species in 10,000 years of directed evolution. Some of what we built is beautiful, some of it is extraordinary science, and some of it, the Jacobin that cannot see past its own feathers, the short-beaked pigeon that cannot feed its own chicks, the bird somersaulting backward across the floor, raises a question worth asking. At what point does breeding become breaking? To understand how we got here, you need to understand where it started. And the answer is not a farm, not a breeding program, and not a deliberate human plan. The answer is architecture. The rock pigeon's natural habitat is cliff faces, steep ledges, narrow overhangs, shelter from predators. When early humans began building permanent structures in Mesopotamia and Egypt, they built the best artificial cliffs in the world, and the pigeons followed. We didn't invite them in, but mud brick walls and grain stores were, from a pigeon's perspective, indistinguishable from the rocky coastal ridges where Columba, livia had lived for millions of years.
The domestication of the pigeon, unlike almost every other animal we've tamed, was the bird's idea as much as it was ours.
Cuneiform tablets and Egyptian hieroglyphics document pigeon keeping as early as 4500 BCE, and archaeological evidence pushes that relationship toward 10,000 years earlier. They were not pets, they were food, message carriers, and in many cultures, sacred animals. Temple records from the reign of Ramses III document more than 6,500 doves given as offerings at Karnak, a detail that tells you the scale at which humans were already managing the species. But as keepers accumulated experience, they noticed variation. Birds with unusual colorings, strange postures, feathers growing in odd directions. And they did what humans tend to do with variation they find interesting. They selected for it, kept the outliers, and discarded the ordinary. That process, across 5,000 years and hundreds of cultures on every inhabited continent, is how you get from a rock dove to a Jacobin pigeon.
The rock dove never lived in the Americas. It came over in the 1600s on European ships where it was used as a food source. And every feral North American pigeon today is a descendant of those domesticated stocks.
And by the time those birds had been living alongside humans for a few generations, something measurable had happened to them. A 2020 study in PLOS Biology found that anti-predator instincts in urbanized animals reached their lowest values after 90 generations. The feral pigeon's famous fearlessness around humans isn't stupidity or complacency. It's a documented consequence of thousands of years of selective breeding. They've been selected generation after generation to trust us. Colin Jerelmack, an environmental sociologist at NYU, described the situation like this. We bred them and made them well adapted to living with people, and now they're still there, even though we don't want them there anymore.
In the 1960s, New York began blaming the birds for disease outbreaks. A meningitis scare accelerated the shift. Birds that had been tolerated, even kept, were now described as vermin, and the phrase rats with wings entered the vernacular and stuck.
But what that phrase erased matters, because these birds had not just wandered in from the field. They grew up with us, and then we decided about 60 years ago, we no longer wanted them. And the development is that recent.
For decades, thousands of keepers kept coops above the tenements of Brooklyn's Queens and the Bronx, a tradition they carried over from Belgium, Germany, and Italy.
Working class immigrants who built small worlds on the only space available to them, the roof. They flew their birds, waving long poles with colored rags to guide the flocks back home. In a city that offered working people very little they could call their own, it was a form of mastery. One Brooklyn keeper who took up the practice at 15 as an escape from street violence said, "The pigeon saved me." Colin Jerelmack estimates that in the 1940s and 50s, the city had several thousand active rooftop keepers. Today, only 100 to 300 remain. Gentrification transformed the rooftops. The coops came down. The tradition that had passed from Italian immigrants to Puerto Rican and Black neighbors in the same buildings, the same boroughs, the same rooftops, that chain of transmission is breaking. Mike Tyson grew up inside this tradition in Brownsville, Brooklyn. His first punch was thrown in defense of one of his birds after a boy ripped its head off. His story belongs here not for the celebrity value, but because it illustrates what this tradition made possible and what the loss of it costs. As one profile of the last pigeon breeders in Brooklyn put it, if you were a family without many resources, you could still build something of your own. Gentrification ended the hobby, but it also ended the last urban context in which ordinary people maintained a direct, daily, generational relationship with the animal we domesticated first. What survives today is still extraordinary to watch. A rooftop flock in motion, 50, 100 birds responding to a keeper's signals, banking and wheeling in formation over the city. It's one of the most remarkable things urban life has to offer. And the birds doing it are the same species as the bird in the show cages, the same species as the bird that will somersault backward across the floor before this film is over. But the rooftop keepers were working on one end of something vast. To see the other end, you have to go back to where the science of this gets strange. Charles Darwin noticed the pigeons first. In 1855, he joined 2 London pigeon clubs, attended shows, collected breeds from around the globe, kept dozens of birds at Down House, and made meticulous skeletal measurements. He was building his case for natural selection, and the pigeon breeders had handed him the most powerful demonstration of selection available anywhere in the world. The difference between a pouter and a fantail, between a Jacobin and a racing homer, was comparable to the differences between separate bird genera. His publisher's reviewer urged him to write a book exclusively about pigeons instead. The reviewer's reasoning: everyone is interested in pigeons. Darwin's logic tracked. If human breeders working over a few hundred generations could produce this degree of variation from a single species, then natural selection, operating over geological time, could produce anything. Darwin produced the first evolutionary tree ever drawn for a group of animals, and his subject was pigeon breeds.
What Darwin was watching in those cages, we now understand on the molecular level. And when scientists were finally able to take a complete look, they found something that nobody expected.
In 2013, a team at the University of Utah sequenced the full rock pigeon genome, and what they found was elegant in the way only genetics can be. A single mutation, one nucleotide change in a gene called EPHB2, controls head crest formation across all 80-plus crested pigeon breeds. The mutation evolved once, and breeders then spread it by pairing crested birds together across dozens of lineages over centuries. Every crested pigeon you've ever seen, every breed, every club, every country, carries the same ancient accident. The same team found that feathered feet are driven by regulatory changes near 2 genes, PITX1 and TBX5, which govern the distinction between forelimbs and hindlimbs in all vertebrates. In pigeons, those changes push leg development towards something resembling a wing, hence the feathers. The gene TBX5, when mutated in humans, causes Holt-Oram syndrome, arm defects, and heart abnormalities in newborns. Yes, the gene that gives a show pigeon fashionable feathered feet is the same gene that determines whether a child is born with functional arms. EPHB2, the head crest gene, has been implicated in Alzheimer's disease and prostate cancer. It turns out fancy pigeons are a working laboratory for vertebrate development biology, running an experiment that started 10,000 years ago and generating data today that applies directly to human medicine. But that same experiment has also been generating something else entirely. The Jacobin's defining feature is a hood of feathers fanning out from around its head. Historical descriptions from the 1600s document an elaborate structure. Victorian breeders pushed further, selecting for size, for uniformity, for even more dramatic fullness. The modern exhibition Jacobin's hood is so large the bird cannot see past it. Owners must trim the feathers around the face for it to eat. In the wild, a Jacobin would be dead within days. Short-beaked breeds like the African owl have bills so compressed they cannot feed their own chicks. Squabs require foster parents or hand feeding to survive. The breed exists only because humans supply what the bird can no longer do for itself. And then there is the fantail. 30 to 40 tail feathers fanned in a wide arc, the neck curving backward to rest on the tail, a posture so extreme that the bird walks with a distinctive rolling gait. Beautiful in a show cage, a liability anywhere else.
Each of these breeds follows the same logic: select for the extreme and discard the ordinary, and then repeat for centuries.
The result is a catalog of forms that would be impossible to believe if you couldn't trace every step. And at one end of that catalog is the bird on this floor. The Parlor Roller's tumbling is not a trick. It's a movement disorder, progressive, heritable, and incurable. Researcher Atusa Samani, who spent years mapping the genetics behind this behavior, found that it appears soon after hatching and intensifies steadily until the birds lose the ability to fly entirely by maturity. There is no treatment. The birds that roll the farthest, the birds that win competitions, are the ones most severely affected. In midair, before the disorder progresses to ground-only tumbling, these birds somersault in flight. For a hawk, they're not prey so much as gravity doing half the work. In Los Angeles, a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service undercover investigation found that roller pigeon clubs would actually kill raptors, protecting their flocks from hawks. An estimated 1,000 to 2,000 raptors per year. The president of the National Birmingham Roller Club was among those convicted. The university's Federation for Animal Welfare has said something that probably shouldn't need to be said. Flight isn't optional behavior for a pigeon. It's something the birds are born with a drive to perform. And the same group is blunt about the cost. When a tumbling bird collides with the ground or a building, the resulting injuries can be severe and painful. Pigeon rescue organizations deal with the downstream consequences. Many fancy breeds, Jacobins, fantails, Parlor Rollers, are surrendered, escape, or abandoned by breeders who move on. And they cannot survive independently. One pigeon rescue has described the Parlor Roller as a prisoner breed, a bird that can never be released because it cannot fly away. But this story doesn't end in the show cage. The last chapter is playing out somewhere most people will never go. Scientists studying wild rock doves, the original Columba livia population still clinging on in parts of Europe, Asia, and North Africa, have found that feral domesticated pigeons are hybridizing with them. The domestic genome, carrying thousands of years of accumulated human selection variation, is spreading into the last wild population of the species. Ornithologist Will Smith, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Helsinki, has stated that this process is irreversible. Once it happens, the originals cannot be recovered.
We began this experiment 10,000 years ago when a cliff-dwelling bird walked into human architecture and found something useful.
We are finishing it now, not in a show cage, not on a rooftop, but in the rocky coastal cliffs where the original animal is running out of room. The Parlor Roller on the concrete floor will never fly. The Jacobin in the show cage cannot see past its own feathers. The feral pigeon on the sidewalk was bred to trust human beings and has no way of knowing that the terms of that arrangement changed just 60 years ago.